I am beyond delighted to introduce to you the wonderful artist and curator Siobhan McLaughlin. Siobhan is based in Glasgow and graduated from the Edinburgh College of Art in 2019. Since then, she has received numerous awards, including the SSA Wilhelmina Brands Graham Award at the RSA, a film commission from the Tate's British Art Network, and the VAS From One to Another Cornwall Exchange Residency, amongst others. Her work has repeatedly been shown at the RSA, as well as galleries across the UK, including the Edinburgh City Art Centre, G39 Cardiff, and the Rebecca Hossa Gallery in London. Experiencing landscape through walking constitutes an integral aspect of Siobhan's artistic practice. Impressions of her surroundings and her place within it are translated into abstract landscape paintings that comprise of sewn together remnant materials and paint whose pigments she often gathers on location. In addition to a thriving career as a visual artist, Siobhan has also curated the highly acclaimed retrospective of Scottish artist Alan Davey, and more recently the group exhibition Scottish Landscapes: A New Generation, both at Dovecot Studios in Edinburgh. So I will now hand over to her so she can speak to you about her work and practice, and I'll be back later as we move into the Q&A.
Thank you very much for having me, Anne, and thanks everyone for joining. So hopefully you can see, I'm not sure how many people are familiar with my work. I'm predominantly an abstract landscape painter. I do a bit of curation, as Anne said, and maybe I'll speak to that later on. Mainly my practice combines personal experiences of walking in the landscape across the UK with kind of material experimentation and compositional devices to create kind of non-traditional landscape paintings. I use predominantly painting alongside drawing, printmaking, some reflective writing and installation to explore themes of place, memory, sustainability. Recent work has evolved from exploring coastal landscapes in southwest Cornwall and around Cromarty on the Black Isle, where I was lucky enough to be on residency for a month. Cornwall last November and Cromarty this March. In both of these places, my practice really starts by walking, slowing down to encounter the nuances of landscape and gather a spectrum of site-specific colours, all affected by light, weather and time. Really interested in depicting particularly Scottish landscapes that don't romanticise the kind of the history and culture of Scotland. So not painting these kind of bonny green hills or rugged landscapes, but more really honing in on small aspects of the landscape that are often overlooked. I would always say that my colour palettes, I'm interested in more in the fact that like a hill isn't just green and granite isn't just grey. There's a whole spectrum of colours if you look close enough. And more recently that's evolved into gathering earth pigments. I've been interested in trying to make my own paint and the materiality of paint for a long time now. And last year in Cornwall, I met an artist, Peter Ward, who taught me a lot more about earth pigments. And so for years, I was really wanting to capture the colouring of the land by walking and making notes as I walked of colours that I saw and gathering some earth, but not really knowing what to do with it. And then as of last year, I've started being able to really paint the landscape with the land, like understanding how to take earth and stone and turn it into pigment for painting. And it feels really exciting to be making something with a material that really goes all the way back to the original, like the first type of paint that's been made. When I was in Cromarty, I met an artist who showed me how to make not earth pigments, but natural pigments. So I used the yellow woad flower to make a blue pigment, which again is nice that it's got this link back to history of the blue being what the Picts put across their faces going into battle. And so although my work really isn't really about the kind of that long history of that, I do find that quite interesting. I don't know if you want to go on to the next slide. So I've got quite a sustainability focused practice, mainly from kind of slowing down and taking time to be a bit more considerate in my practice, but also because when I was at art school, you don't have a lot of money, and I couldn't really, or didn't want to buy fresh canvas and linen. So I would find scraps of materials or remnant materials and sew them together to make paintings. And I started that in maybe 2016. And that's kind of developed this interest in sustainable materials and kind of really focusing my practice on materiality and kind of evoking that tangibility of landscape through material. Maybe if you want to go to the next slide. Yeah, pieces like this. I found it interesting over the years of painting the kind of oscillation between abstract painting that is taking forms from the landscape and then more kind of representational landscape. And this piece that I made recently, I really enjoyed going back to a more abstracted sense, something a wee bit more raw and evoking the experience of the landscape than maybe my other recent works do. That piece, and also the next slide. Or the next one, sorry. These two pieces are both made completely from natural and earth pigments, which I personally just find amazing and really invigorating to see what can come from our landscape. I think that's really an amazing thing to slow down and look and, you know, gather earth pigments while being conscious of land erosion, but being able to make a completely natural paint that maybe is working towards a more sustainable way of painting. So I use these remnant materials that I sew together and use the natural paints as a way to try and not impact too much on the world. I think the world is full of stuff, and I kind of constantly am fighting with this idea of why on earth am I making more, producing more to put out into the world. So I guess this kind of material sustainable interest kind of helps me work through that. Maybe the next slide, and I could just say a wee bit about the exhibition. So yeah, recently I curated a show at Dovecot Studios called Scottish Landscapes, a New Generation. And it's really great to see a couple of the artists in this talk today, so thanks for coming. The show highlighted 10 emerging artists based in Scotland that had all graduated from Scottish art schools from the last 4 years. And I was really keen that the artists weren't all Scottish, but they all studied in Scotland and continued to live here. I think there's a real movement of people after you graduate art school in Scotland thinking you have to move to London, and it's all about kind of looking south. And that's why it's great to do something like this, looking north. So yeah, I was really keen to highlight the work that's being made now in Scotland, and really highlight the range of engaging work and exciting stuff that people manage to make just 4 years after graduating. So yeah, if anyone has questions about that, you can ask away. I could talk forever about it. But maybe, Anne, we could move on to your questions.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. That was really nice to get that overview on previous works of yours. Let me just maybe move back. We can, I guess we can just move through the slides again because it's so nice to see the works as we speak about them. Give me about, I'm gonna look down on my phone just because I'm screen sharing. So but yes, so I do have a few questions. So I'm gonna start, which I guess is the privilege of organizing this event. I get to ask the first questions, but then once we come to the end of them, we'll open up the Q&A. So everybody who's got a question will have an opportunity to ask them. I think it might be easiest if you would just pop them in the Q&A section. And that might be the sort of most straightforward way. And then I could just read them out, and that way we don't need to navigate people muting or unmuting themselves. So, okay. Yes. So the first question that I have, so you talked a little bit about, how your artistic practice has developed from the beginnings at ECA, and sort of how, it evolved also over the years as you went to Cornwall and learned more about how to make or how to work with earth pigments. And I suppose, as you said, you were walking through the landscapes, and obviously you take inspiration from the landscapes and the colors that you experience. So I guess I was wondering how working in that way changed your way of being in the landscapes as you're walking and gathering pigments. Does it change your experience of the space? Can you even go for a walk anymore without thinking of it as like all the potential pigments that you could gather if you go for a walk and you're not working? Oh, so where's the line, I guess? So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think I'm ever not working. Just because it's a great privilege to have a job that's about kind of really engaging and exciting things that interest you. So yeah, I don't think I ever go outside now without really like paying attention to everything and looking and kind of searching for colours, which is exciting. It's interesting though to reflect back on how my work has changed over the years, like from 2014 when I started art school. I'd done 2 years in Glasgow after school before I went to uni, working on my art and working. And so when I got to Edinburgh, I had a wee bit more of an idea of what I wanted to do. I still made a lot of really terrible work, which I guess I still make terrible work now. You really need to work through that to make the good stuff. But in 2014, I guess I was more taking cues from the landscape, and like I'd walk around Edinburgh and maybe like take photos of doors that I thought were interesting colours. So there was the seeds of the ideas of looking for colour, but not really understanding why I was looking for it. And then that went into me climbing up Arthur's Seat every week and kind of sitting and looking down into the city and thinking about what it means to be up there and living down there, and just kind of, I guess, trying to evoke some sort of sense of place by kind of abstracting the city. And at that point, I read Nan Shepherd's book, The Living Mountain, which I think at this point every person in Scotland has read, it seems, which is great. And so walking in the Cairngorms became a huge part of my work, and kind of slowing down, walking inwards in this kind of folding in on itself landscape really intrigued me. And actually this piece here is from a walk into the Larrick mountain pass in the Cairngorms, where you kind of, the work's kind of about coming over this plateau, and all of a sudden like you lose your breath because you've witnessed for the first time this hidden valley. And yeah, so I guess the work's evolved from walking in the city walking up Arthur's Seat, walking in the Cairngorms, and then having these residencies where I've got to go to southwest Cornwall, Cromarty, and I'm just back from a research project up in Orkney, and being on these edges of the land has really affected the work recently. Yeah, and kind of, I guess, to go back to your question of how my art practice has affected my experience of the landscape, I think a lot more about the sea now. And I'm from Glasgow, that there's not really that access to the edges of the land. And so it is interesting to think more about the water and movement of land now, definitely.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I guess sort of because you just mentioned the residencies that you went on and all the different places they brought you to, I suppose there's like a link between, say, Cornwall and Scotland. So both are Celtic or have Celtic histories. And so there's like maybe some, like cultural, like historical links between those landscapes. And I guess I was wondering, as you go to these places that are not in Scotland, how do you experience the landscape there? Like, because there's obviously different materials there and potentially different colors. Is there something that, because you were speaking also about your sense of place earlier, so I guess how does all of that relate when you're somewhere else, but you're still engaging in the same activity, i.e. walking, experiencing landscape and gathering pigments and processing your environment in that way?
It's interesting thinking about the connection, the Celtic connection between Scotland and Cornwall, because I do think about that quite a lot. I think about my practice as a Scottish artist and what that means in the UK more broadly. Before I went down to Cornwall, I learned a wee bit of Cornish as a kind of, I guess, a kind of respectful thing to do in the culture. But also because I'm interested in the fact that Celtic languages have a really lovely connection to nature that English kind of lacks. And I wonder, Cornwall, I found people to be really reflecting on that culture in a way that the like art scene in Glasgow that I'm in, I wasn't really having those conversations with people. So when I went to Cornwall, an artist, Sophie Berriman, was doing a project called the Mescla Conference, which was artists and researchers discussing Cornish cultural identity. And I went to that on my first day down in Cornwall. So that was really interesting to really get a sense of the people and what the artists based there were kind of thinking about that. But as far as a sense of belonging and connectiveness, it really is the people that you meet. Well, so far from the few residencies I've done, it's really the people that you meet on residency that give you that kind of connectedness. And I found that quite funny to reflect on since I've got a landscape practice, and the landscapes I walk in are really interesting. There's like geological, historical, physical aspects to them that are really invigorating. But that's not exactly what gets into that really like deeper sense of belonging that comes from the kind of month-long residency experience. I'm kind of reflecting on my practice over the past few days. I think the thing that excites me most when I'm on a residency is really the combination of landscape and people. So like walking with someone when I was in Cornwall, and Cromarty actually, and Orkney, and invited artists to go on walks with me because I've realised that that's actually, I think, how I would prefer to talk to anyone. I think that would be my chosen method of communication, would be meeting someone and going on a walk. Because I think if you don't really know the person very well, you really need to navigate things while walking that kind of interrupt the normal flow of conversation. Like, you learn so much more about a person while you're out walking than just sitting across the table from them. And I think it's interesting how that kind of shared activity really opens things up. And so yeah, it's being down in Cornwall as the first solo residency I'd been on. I found that really important, that the people I met there really enhanced my experience of landscape so much.
Can I just ask you about the walks you just mentioned? Like, do you, if you haven't been somewhere, like, would you walk that walk before you would take somebody, or would you just suggest a certain walk? And if so, like, would you suggest a difficult one, or more like a proper nice little walk? You know what I mean?
So far, like when I was in Orkney a couple of weeks ago, I met an artist, Laura Drever, and asked her to take me on a walk. So she chose one of her like favourite kind of local walks to where she lives, just outside Kirkwall. And that was nice because it was, I guess she was thinking, because she didn't know me very well, that it would be quite an easy walk, which was great because I think it'd be a lot more difficult to have a conversation while like hiking a Munro. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, so far, now I'm saying it out loud that I've been asking people to take me on walks. It sounds almost a bit extractive, which I'm not wanting to do at all. I guess I'm just interested in people sharing their sense of place and sharing their kind of special connection with landscape.
Yeah, and I guess there's also like an altered state to walking, you know, just like physically and how you feel in your body as well. But I guess that leads me also to another question, which like you haven't really touched on before, so I hope it's okay if I bring this up. But I guess when we spoke a few months ago, you were sort of telling me about how your practice has changed also in regards to things that you've experienced in the past. And so you mentioned that there were factors that also sort of altered your own experience in the landscape. And I was wondering if you would be comfortable sort of talking about that a little bit, also in the context of, I guess, like care, healing, regeneration, because I feel that a lot of the time when we think about those themes in relation to nature, we sort of assume it's about feeling really comfortable and it's this like pleasant Sunday afternoon walk and it soothes us, and like all of these things can be true and we can find them, and that's wonderful. But there might also be other things we seek out in regards to those themes, and that's sort of something I thought about after our conversation. So yeah.
Yeah, I found it interesting because just to go back to the materials of my work, I've been sewing the materials since 2016. And I think when I started sewing them together, as well as it being cheap, it was about having a kind of physical form of colour and like a tangible form of colour to form the substrate for the painting. And then in 2017, I was in a car accident, and that really impacted my life, but my work in ways that I didn't quite realise at first. And that, I mean, I don't want to take up space speaking about pain when the world is in such an awful position. And I'm very lucky for the accident I had, that I can still walk about. Now, it's difficult though, because I started thinking about sewing together these materials and what that might mean after this accident. And I was sharing my work like in artist talks after graduating, and people would often ask me about the sewing as a kind of repairing and caring thing, and kind of like piecing myself back together after being knocked down. And at first I was quite, I really didn't want to accept that reading. I think because part of me was feeling like it was a kind of a bit of an issue with like sewing being traditionally women's work. Like people would ask me if I was sewing while I was stuck in bed, as if, you know, I had like some embroidery on my lap. You know, I didn't like that connotation. I think because I was so keen to kind of find a strength in my work rather than succumbing to the need to piece myself back together. So yeah, it's been interesting to reflect on that. I do feel like the materials have become more important to me after the accident. I think because of the idea of the histories and the stories of the materials being woven into the painting. I've become a lot more interested in memories and evoking my experience and memories of landscape and different landscapes, and how that can all be kind of sewn into the one piece. I think when you go through an experience and have a condition like PTSD, that your mind is actually just an amazing, magical thing. The way that your mind combines memories is just, it really gives you a better understanding of the world, I think. And I think that's really benefited me. I mean, a silver lining, but it benefited the way that I look at my art practice, and that I definitely now use painting to kind of process some of those ideas. Yeah, I think also it's tricky because my accident happened when I was still at art school, and the simple thing would have been to drop out, and that's what I was advised to do. But I was really very certain in not wanting it to stop me, and kind of wanted to defy the idea that I had to just sew while in my bed. And if you go, I think 2 slides, please. Or maybe one other one. That works tiny. This work I made in 2019 for my degree show, and you know, it was a really painful work to make, and I'm really keen for it not to be read as like this kind of tortured artist, painful experience thing, but more about the honesty in showing, kind of exposing the pain that's part of the process of being alive, to be honest, and kind of speaking more to the, not the human condition, but like just what it's like to be alive in the world. And so works like this, I no longer was covering the surface in pain. I was letting the materials just to stay bare and raw, and you can see the stretcher behind, and the threads were left loose. And I think I was interested in making visible the labour involved in art, not making an oil painting that is like an illusion or like a kind of shiny object, but making something that really embraced the physicality of painting, especially something so big as a woman that had been knocked down. And I could see people around me making these, particularly all the boys in my class at art school, making these really big paintings and saying, "Oh, don't worry, you can just make a small wee painting in your bed." I was really quite firm about not doing that, and making a work that really evoked my experience of landscape. So this work comes from a walk up Loch Nagar in the Cairngorms, following a route that Nan Shepherd writes about in The Living Mountain, and kind of thinking about how I'm bringing things into the landscape that maybe I wasn't before. And that walk, I think I did it just over a year after my accident, and it was really difficult. It was physically very painful to do, but really gave me a new understanding of the landscape. And I think, sorry, this is a very long answer to your question. Just the second bit of your question, when you're talking about like the kind of nice Sunday walks and gentle healing that we expect from nature, I think maybe I have more of an understanding now of the violence of nature, and the fact that healing can be done in a way that is more aggressive isn't quite the right word, but more raw maybe, and it doesn't need to be like a kind of Gwyneth Paltrow goop healing in nature thing. It can be about like embracing the labor that's required to keep pushing, because really, like, nature isn't this calm, gentle, flowing stream. You know, it's survival of the fittest, and it's a, you know, bug eat bug world. And I guess I'm thinking a bit about that, and about, yeah, how to evoke that. And I guess that kind of all comes back to not overly romanticizing the Scottish landscape. It's like there's paintings of Loch Nagar that were done in maybe like the 18th century, and they're these like beautiful huge hills with like a tiny wee peasant kind of hobbling along. And that's really not what I'm interested in portraying. I'm interested in this, like, the rawness of, I'm not saying this is what the landscape looks like, but it was my experience of the landscape.
I think it's a really wonderful. I really love this work, and the way in which you reflect on the process of making it, and sort of the materiality of the painting process. But then also, I guess, what follows the painting process, which is something, especially as you can just go to, you know, the art supply shop and just buy pre-treated canvases and all that. Like, people really don't think about what comes after. And you know, you sort of touched on that a little bit earlier, but yeah, like, working with such, you know, big scales, that's really difficult. Like, do you do that on your own, or is that sometimes a collaborative process?
Yeah, I've tried. I think that piece, I would have had someone lift it up with me, because you can't move it just one person, obviously. But mostly, when I was at art school, I mostly tried to do things by myself, probably just out of stubbornness of wanting to be able to do it by myself, to my detriment. Recently, I've learned that you can lean on other people, and also that actually a lot of art is collaborative. A lot of artists don't actually make every single piece of the process. And I think I found that quite difficult to understand. You know, you look at these huge artist studios and you think, how could you not be making your own work? But I've managed to kind of let go. So I made a piece recently around the same size as that piece, but portrait. And I worked with a costume design maker who sewed some of the material for me, because it's such a difficult process for me physically to do. So yeah, bringing in other creative people is important, definitely.
And I guess it sort of ties back also to, like, something that you mentioned earlier, and the materials, you know, that you use and the way in which you experience landscape, all of which seem to be this entanglement, you know, of materials that obviously come from somewhere, and that were, you know, moved from one, processed and moved, and like the people that have been in that process and the stories that are woven into it, both into the landscape and the materials, and then ultimately also your paintings. So I feel that really reflects that enmeshment, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. I think if you go on to the next slide, the materials in this piece were sourced all, I think, when I was in Cornwall, and it's really been something interesting for me to reflect on, because I thought that my practice was really like introspective and really personal and not really to be shared. But actually, this piece was made from, like, the blue fabric is a part of a fisherman's smock that an artist in Cornwall gave me, that had the fisherman's name like written into it, or some old dressmaking linen that was part of a suit, or some windsurf sail that another artist gave to me. And even the paint, the earth pigments that I gathered in Cornwall, this artist Peter Ward walked with me while I gathered them. And then the bright yellow you see in the middle of the piece comes from the leaf of the birch tree, and an artist in Cromarty is the one who showed me how to make that. And so it is definitely, it's just nice realizing as a landscape painter that it is about that kind of community of people around you and the connections that you make. And when I was in Cornwall, actually, I, instead of having kind of an exhibition at the end of the month, I had a wee gathering of people, because really I realised that the work that I'd done and the research I'd done in Cornwall was actually just about these connections and bringing people together from the art scene there that perhaps weren't connected before.
That's really nice. I really like that. Yeah, so if anyone has any questions, I think I might have one more, but if anyone has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and I'll read them out. And otherwise, I'll just keep going. So, okay, let me see. Sorry. Yeah, so I guess actually, I think we've sort of touched on most of them. So
maybe actually we could speak for a moment, just thinking of the Centre for Energy Ethics being part of this series. I personally wasn't quite sure what energy ethics meant, and I'd be interested to get your kind of your take on it, Anne. But I guess I've been thinking over the past couple of weeks about what the different types of energy ethics that are part of the work, like the materials that I use being kind of reclaimed materials that otherwise would go to waste, like offcuts from commercial production processes, sewing them into the work, and the earth pigments being a more sustainable way to paint rather than using oil paints that have that you need white spirit and things like that. But I think it's interesting thinking of that's really privileging the environment's energy ethics, but in terms of my own energy, that like depletes me. I was speaking to someone recently about the idea of like a cost benefit analysis, and really if I did one of those, then I would never paint again in this way, because the cost well outweighs the benefit, in terms of it just being like a really long, arduous process, which I guess kind of reflects the arduous process of walking that I find it to be. So yeah, it's interesting having considered this idea of energy, whose energy we're privileging. So yeah, I'd love to get your take on energy ethics.
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, I'm, as I said, I'm doing a PhD in art history, so I cannot speak to the, scientific components to energy ethics. And so the Centre for Energy Ethics at the University of St Andrews, they are an incredibly interdisciplinary research center, and they focus on a whole range of different topics, which is really magnificent. And I think the way in which our talk series fits into their wonderful work is by, I guess, really opening up the ways in which we can think about energy. So, for example, and bringing them together with, I guess, like more conventional or traditional understandings of energy. So one of the things that you already talked about and that spoke to me in that context was, as you said, the materials that you use, and sort of, reflecting also on like what are those materials, how are they being produced, where do we encounter them perhaps. So I think there's a lot of different readings that you could sort of pursue by focusing just on the material history of the materials that are used. But again, I mean, I think I think my thinking aligns with you, and I think by sort of thinking more about energy ethics in the past 1.5 years in the context of this series, I also started to think about more like the personal energies that are being involved. Yeah, and what does that sort of mean? But then, everything obviously being a product of those different energies coming together. And okay, I'm gonna stop now with my rambling. So Tony Hara asks, Does the directions of the stitches and the thread relate to the walk route? Do you do the sewing from memory, or do you do it on the walk while being on the walk? And how do you collage the fabric together? Is it determined by the scale of the materials you find or gather?
Thanks, great question. The materials I kind of piece together based on their shape when I get them. I think that's probably why I'm interested in remnant materials, because they already have a shape, and you don't just get them in nice square lines, clean cut lines. And so I try to I basically sit on a floor, just surrounded by material, and kind of intuitively, I guess, place materials that I feel work together. Sometimes I work with materials from one place, like when I was in Cornwall. So this painting that's off Cornwall is made from materials from Cornwall. I'm interested in that idea of having the painting of the landscape come completely from that landscape, but also from having paintings of one landscape being made up of materials from another, or like my childhood bedroom curtains combined with the fisherman's smock of a man I never met. It's, yeah, the materials kind of speak for themselves in terms of how I'll lay them out. And yeah, the sewing is just a kind of a practical concern. So that's just to connect the materials. I've not done any kind of sewn line since 2016, when I first started working with the materials. I was really keen to stop myself from overthinking how the fabrics come together and how I use the sewn line, because I was worried that the work would start to become quite contrived and quite kind of overthought. And if I start to think too much about the aesthetic of the work, then it just turns out to be a rubbish piece of work. So yeah, I try to let the materials speak for themselves, if that makes sense. And no, I don't do any sewing when I'm out and about, but I do draw. So all of my paintings come from going out into the landscape and walking, and then drawing forms while I'm out there. And I've always found that quite interesting, because most of the time since I'm in the UK, it's bloody freezing. And particularly up in the Cairngorms, being up there in the snow, the jagged line you then get from very quick sketches then makes it a more interesting composition for a painting.
Thank you. I'm going to read out a comment. Don't think it's... Oh, the question followed. Okay. Hi, Siobhan. Thank you for showing your work in your presentation. I work in the south of England on the marshes of Essex as an artist, concerning myself with nuclear history and culture and our relationship with the landscape. I use swimming as part of my process, and swimming, like walking, costs energy. It takes labor to move in the landscape. There's no space for sentiment. My question is, and this is something I struggle with, is that as soon as the work is out, that there is a static or a stable, and that loses that energy. How do you deal with that?
That's a very interesting question. I think it's tricky because it really speaks to how the artists feel when we, because I guess if you're speaking about selling your work or even just exhibiting it, it's a tricky dilemma between the creation of art and the commerciality. But it's also, I think, a complete falsehood to think of artists as living in some sort of bubble where you don't need to earn a living from what you do as your living. So it's really tricky. I think if your question's asking about how do you keep the work, like the energy of the work while exhibiting it, I would say I do that through really thinking about the methods of exhibiting it. Like in the first image on the slide of the big installed piece, that really is about celebrating the landscape. And so that was exhibited obviously outside and only for 5 hours before the whole thing snapped and fell down. That was then exhibited for the first time in an indoor established space at the Brigget in Glasgow. And instead of having it on a wall, I installed it kind of suspended in the space. So it was kind of at your eye level, as if you're looking at this landscape. And so I guess kind of making it an engaging installation is what I found interesting for this specific work. But I guess it really depends. It depends on the work you make. I'm sorry if that didn't really answer the question. You can ask another question.
Yeah, if there's any other questions, now is your time. And otherwise, I might just start to wrap up. Or maybe, I guess I do have one more question, actually. So I think it's so interesting that you're using pigments from the landscape to depict the landscape itself. And I guess I was wondering, because it's such an immediate process, I guess I was wondering if you have any tips or recommendations for people who are interested in that, and maybe for themselves.
Yeah, it's interesting because, yes, it is an immediate process in terms of you can be out for a walk and see a stone, and all you need to do is find another maybe flatter, bigger grey stone and rub it against the stone to see if it gives off any pigment. And if that doesn't work, then dip it in some water, usually if you're next to a stream, and see if that would give the colour. But that's kind of where the immediacy stops because you then need to grind if you want to actually make paint out of it, you really need to grind the stone or earth down, which takes a really long time, and if you've got wee arms, it's very labour intensive. But once you have your pigment ready to go, it is a really great way to make paint. And I find it interesting because different people use earth pigments for different reasons. So I'm interested in them being part of my process out walking. And I only use earth pigments that I've collected myself. Whereas like some other artists I know order them online, or I was at a geology meetup in Glasgow recently, and one of the geologists was really excited about hearing that I make the pigments from stone, and was asking me if would I like some lapis lazuli to make into blue paint. And I think it's tricky because maybe not everyone would consider the ethical implications of that. So as well as just not having gathered it myself, I definitely wouldn't use a pigment that is extracted from an area like that. And just thinking of the energy that's involved in getting that pigment across the world is interesting to think about. But yeah, I guess in terms of tips, going to rivers and looking for like highly pigmented rocks is good, or anything that looks quite soft and is maybe clay based and you can kind of mush into paint. It's good.
Very good. Yeah, I also just thought, there's so many facets that you can open up through thinking of energy ethics, I guess, in the context of, gathering pigments and some of the things that you just mentioned, which is super interesting. And I think I just had this thought that it's also, if we say that, extraction is often labeled as negative, we criticize extractive practices, but I think, with your practice, you could say it's extractive, but there's a tension, because I would think it is more ethical. And I think it's interesting because I think it provides a very interesting reflection on extractive practices and provides more nuance maybe also to those discussions. So thank you so much for sharing that. We do have one last question and then we're gonna wrap up. So Izzy said, I love the determination in your work. And she also thanked you for a beautiful talk. I just wondered if you had found a way to make sustainable painting mediums to paint with.
Not quite yet. I spoke to an artist who told me that you can use soy to use as a painting medium, and I guess you can also use like egg tempera. But then if you're, I don't know how that works if you're vegan. So yeah, the answer is no, but I'm working on it. It's something I'm definitely interested in, but I'm also keen for my work not to become like pigeonholed into kind of being an earth pigment artist, because I think there's many aspects of my work materially that are just as important as the earth pigments. So I'm not investigating it too much, but it is something I'm definitely interested in doing.
Very good. Well, you got lots of nice comments when people had to leave a bit early, so definitely have a look in that. But well, yeah, I mean, thank you so much. This was really wonderful. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed listening to you, and the opportunity of asking you so many questions is a real treat. And it got me super excited for our event with you and Amy in early February in 2024. And that'll be, so your event was the inaugural event, and you will also close the series together, so which is really nice. So definitely sign up to our newsletter if you want to keep up to date with future events. Visit our website, visit our Instagram, whatever you prefer. You can also follow us on Eventbrite. And before I let you all sign off, I just wanted to remind you of our upcoming event in 2 weeks with Hannah Tuliki. He's another Glasgow-based artist and whose work is really wonderful. And yeah, I hope I will see some of you again in 2 weeks. Thank you again, Siobhan, for your time and for sharing your beautiful work with us. It's really lovely, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, and thanks everyone for coming.